There's definitely a slowdown. And with that, the big thing that I would try to highlight and encourage is you went from a period of time where everything was really, really easy in a way that like people were just flooding in. It was hard for a lot of other reasons, and I'm not necessarily going to get into that today. But now that it's gotten more competitive and it's gotten a little bit more difficult to continue to see growth, understanding customer segmentation and who is your audience, who is that kind of ideal client avatar, I think is really, really, really important. And so some of the different things with the data as I was going through it, I was like, okay, what kind of questions would people have and what can we actually answer? So the first one would be, okay, let's say maybe I've grown, I started out in a place, but I now want to own my real estate. I want to build. Where do I do that? How do I do that? How do I make that decision? Historically, it's been find someone that is a healthcare real estate expert, find someone locally, get an introduction, ask around, and then kind of really trust their opinion, which again, they are experts and they have a lot of good insights, but it wasn't really a data driven process. So my co-partner in this business, that's what he's done here in central Indiana for a long time. He has a lot of good information, but he was like, hey, that still leaves a little bit to be desired at times to really make a data driven decision. Sure, you can have demographics, you can say what people make, if they're married, stuff like that. Hey, this is what the houses are worth here. There's X amount of population. We need X amount for this clinic or hospital to be successful. Great, this is a good location. Well, you can go a little bit deeper. You can also then look at what makes a location better than another. I have a good example right now with someone that is looking to possibly do a de novo startup in the kind of the Miami area, and she's looking at different locations. And it's basically like, okay, I'm down to four. I met with my local real estate person that knows the area. I actually know what areas I can afford or what makes sense. Which one is best? How do I make that decision? Well, I kind of like this area better than this area. Is that really the right decision, or is it just it's closer to home and that's why I want this area? And then is it an ideal fit for my practice? Let's say you wanted to acquire a practice, you wanted to sell a practice, and you want to be able to speak to whoever the next buyer is. What's the ideal fit? And then is there demand for the services? Is it oversaturated? And understanding the avatar and how do I market to them? So those are a handful of different questions that I think the information can answer. But I wanted to walk through really a case study of my local area, and hopefully it won't step on anyone's toes. And I was trying to make it as easy as possible because it is pretty wild, the information you can pull. So I picked, hey, let's just pick two different VCA hospitals that are here locally to me. So I'm here in central Indiana. I actually live in Noblesville. I drive by the Stony Creek Animal Hospital all the time. And then the other one is a little bit south of me in Fishers, Indiana. So you can see where these are. Obviously, just quick screenshots, but these are not too terribly far from each other. But they're both opened, been around for quite a while. And I was curious. I'm like, let's take the data that we can extract and look at these locations and say, hey, did VCA make a good decision on this, and why maybe did they choose these specific locations? And so the first thing that you can look at, and this is kind of just a quick snapshot of the competition in an area. So all those V's, those are all veterinary hospitals. And those are sitting here in Hamilton County, which is one of the most affluent counties in Indiana, and it covers just north of Indianapolis. So for a lot of folks, the north side is where they reside. Maybe they work in Indianapolis. Obviously, a ton of people now work remotely, like myself, so don't have that commute. But then you map around it a drive time. And so for the Noblesville location, that the red around that picture is a 15-minute drive time. And so it's looking at Google Maps and saying, hey, on an average day, where could people within 15 minutes get to your hospital? And you can see, the line dragging back to the actual specific hospital, the address here, and then the drive time around it, all the competition. Same thing here for the Fishers location, drive time, here it is. The interesting thing is this is the Noblesville Hospital here. They're not far apart, right? These are pretty close together. It is a fairly dense population, which makes sense why they selected that. But you can then look at and analyze real quickly, hey, is this a saturated market? Is it an area that is, willing or able to let me grow into it, which I think is pretty interesting. So you can take it a step further. And I think this is fun because you can layer things on a map. And you can get all this data visually, but then you can also get it in, let's say, more of like an Excel format. So it depends on how you are. Obviously, for a presentation, it'd be extremely boring for me to just show you Excel stuff. Now, maybe for all the Granite Peak folks, more of the CPA mindset, data analytical, they just want the spreadsheet. Maybe I could provide that as well. And yes, we could, but I like visuals. And I think for any sort of PowerPoint, you want visuals. So the two different charts here, we could overlay again competition over top. Let's start on the right side. So I basically overlaid both locations and then the drive time. So you see the blue for the Fishers location, the red for the Noblesville location. So the overlap of what they're able to grab is, it's a pretty good amount of territory that they're able to dip into. So you can get down into Indy and all the way across. Now, what the really interesting thing is, and all these have live maps, and these are obviously just screenshots of them. These little dots, so let's just pick one up here, right? These are households that are considered ideal veterinary clients. So where's the data coming from? The data is coming from Experian. So for those that understand Experian, Experian is the credit agency, right? So they have access to all kinds of information. And so some of this is going to feel very big brother at times, and I get that. So we're going to use it for good, because our use case here is to use this data to become the best veterinarian to serve basically the community that you're in. So that's the way to look at it. But Experian, again, has all this data because everyone uses their credit card for almost all their purchases. And so you can then create a profile around a person of who would be more likely to be a veterinary clinic consumer and who is not. So like my household, we're not spending money on Chewy. We're not, going to pet stores. There's no spend in our credit cards that would show us as being an ideal veterinary client, because my wife is allergic to pets. We were talking about that before we jumped on. A lot of people are surprised at that. So we might not score really, really high or be at all the ideal client, which makes sense. We have no pets. We're not going to spend money. We don't need those services today. But Experian has the breakdown of income, age, home value, kids, education, all these things. And they break it down into 71 different profiles. And we'll look at some of these profiles later on, and you can kind of identify then the avatar that would spend. And so what they've done is said, hey, there's 5 avatars that come hell or high water anywhere in the United States. These are ideal veterinary clients based on all the information. So you can aggregate all this stuff, and then let's map them out. So obviously very dark gray means there's a heavy concentration of these people. Now for me, I know the location. I know where these places are because I live here. I live in Noblesville. It's easy for me to know, like, yes, this would be an ideal spot to put a veterinary hospital. However, not everyone is going to be going into an area where they know everything about that area, right? So you can look at this information and think about it in a couple of different ways. You can think of it, I want to expand. I want to take my location, which has done really, really well here in Noblesville, and I want to take it, I want to put it in, Effingham, Illinois, or some other place, right? Madison, Wisconsin. Can I create the same kind of audience here that I have there? Yeah, you can look for where is there like places to open up a location. So I do think this is a lot of what larger corporate groups are looking at, is saying, hey, what is these similar areas? You can do the same thing. You could say, hey, I want to open up another location in this metro area. Where's the other spot that might make the most sense? But you can visually quickly see, if I would overlay, right, all the hospitals next to all the demand, boom, 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 you see very clearly, hey, these people can intuitively, or have done it very calculated, laid out where their hospitals are. And then you can see veterinary spend. And this one, I don't think came through as good as I would have liked, partially because it's going to show, you can change it to be like, obviously higher, more red is going to be higher spend. It's too broad, right? And so this is just me with not giving you the best visual, but you can kind of see darker orange is going to be higher spend. And when these maps are live, so a lot of times in the report or the analytics, these are all live maps you can actually interact with and go see things. You can zoom in and look at different things, the same way that you could zoom in and find out exactly what hospitals here and here and here and here. But on this, you can see different areas or blocks that would be higher spend. And so maybe you would want to identify higher spend, less competition, good density. So all that would come together and to give you this idea of a healthcare industry site score model, which is a mouthful, right? And so what this does is it's going to give you a score of each location. To me, this is the most sought after. This was our initial idea of how to create something that would give someone is this a good location? Yes or no? Give me a score, aggregate it together. And so 100 is average. Seems very strange, right? 100 is average. So when people see like a 90, they're like, ooh, I'm great. This is an A, I'm getting a great score. 100 is average. It says, hey, in the United States, 100 is the average veterinary clinic in a potential location. So anything above that would be X% higher. So 9% higher than the average location for the Noblesville location, and 8% higher for Fishers. This shocked me that they were that close together. I was like, I wonder if VCA, how they make these decisions. But with it, they were so close together. I was going to pick the one that was the higher score of the two to go through. The default was Noblesville because that's where I live. I was like, okay, let's dig more into the Noblesville location. So the report then builds out from there. So you have the score, right? 100 is average, 109. This is a great score. We like 109. And it's a 20-minute drive time. And it's going to always default to a drive time that fits with the urban density score. So this is an urban density score being in town. So it's saying it's in town based on its proximity, density of population, all these different things. So you could have, downtown Chicago, it's going to be a shorter trade area because it's so dense. If I'm in Bluffton, Indiana, where I grew up, which is much more rural, it's going to be in rural and it's going to expand that area to pull in other things. The other thing that's really important about this urban density score is it compares this site to 50 other clinics, and I'll show it on the next page, that are similar to this site with the same urban density scores in Indiana. The cool thing that you can do is you could say, hey, I really respect, Dr. Megan. She's got an awesome practice, but it's in Dallas. I'm in Indianapolis. I want to recreate what she's doing. I want to compare her site to my potential site. You can do that. Now, in doing that, her site might be a completely different density score. And you have to understand that could, skew things a little bit where maybe the site score is really high there and it's going to, pool and make your score slightly lower. By default, it's just going to aggregate Indiana locations or Michigan locations or California locations or Arizona locations to give you a scoring that is going to feel the most relevant to where you're at. But you can change that. You can edit it, and you can bring in other hospitals if you wanted to. So anyways, that's the way this specific one is broken down. And then you're going to look at patient value. And it's going to be the full area. It says half unless otherwise noted. So the full trade area, TA stands for trade area. And then we get to get into the fun stuff. This to me is, again, the most sought after piece of information. This is the thing that we said when we set out we wanted to build, right? Give someone an easy understanding of, is this the right location to build my hospital? Stack as many odds in their favor. 109, that would be stacking odds in your favor. Residential core patient score. There's 50,000 people that are a core patient for a veterinary hospital in this area within 20 minutes. 50,000 people, which is awesome. This is not telling you the population. We'll get to that later. It's much higher. This is, again, going back to Experian. This is saying people that are likely to spend and come into your hospital and spend money as a veterinary client, which is great. And you can then compare the minimum, the average, and the maximum of all the other locations. Next, you go to average expenditure on vet services. And so then you can see the minimum, the average, the maximum. It's towards the higher end. I said that earlier. I would expect that based on the location of where it is in the state and knowing roles, jobs, incomes, all those things. It makes sense that it's going to have a higher propensity to spend. The other thing, 5-year population growth, it's going to be pretty high. It's estimated to grow at 6.5. So that's a positive trend. Lots of people growing, spend a lot of money. The other thing you can look is, okay, how many big box retailers, grocery stores, blah, 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 within 20 minutes, right? So those are all things. This is not picking up a couple different grocery stores here, which I noticed because I obviously live here. I'm like, I wonder why that is. And so there should be some more. And so there can be little notes sometimes with these reports that would need to be quantified, because there definitely is within this area. This is also 1 mile, so it is a little shorter, but I do know that there is one there. Last thing is competition. So why isn't this score like 120? Sounds great. They spend a bunch. There's a bunch of people there. Everyone wants to spend on vet med. Everyone should come to, Hamilton County, build in Noblesville, have a hospital. Well, core households per veterinarian. So this is a little different than population, right? So a lot of times you'll hear the idea of like, oh, there needs to be a population of 2,000 per veterinarian to keep busy or have enough demand. This is going back to core households being with Experian, with buying habits of saying these are people that would come into your practice, and these are ideally suited for what you're doing. So it's not going to be as high as maybe the number that a lot of people would look at or think of. So it's a little bit of a thing to know, because a lot of times people will say that's so low, core households. Well, they're thinking of just total population, not knowing there's going to be certain people that have no pets, have no desire to have any pets, don't fit your ideal audience. This is looking at the ideal audience for who would go visit a veterinarian and saying there's 516. It's a little under the average because it's per veterinarian. Remember, we looked up here, a lot of competition, right? A lot of competition. So when you look at core houses per veterinarian, that's why. You look at veterinary facilities in this location, it's the full trade area, right? 20 minutes plus a mile. There's 32 other options. A lot of competition in this area. So that's the negatives, right? The positives are up here, the negatives are down here. You aggregate that, some other things, that's how you get your score. The scoring with it being consistent. The other nice thing for us as a company, as Pinpoint, right? Is this organization is going to run tons of these reports, hopefully. Like that's our at least business model, right? Is our thought that this is needed. We will then be able to take those scores in and see what it looks like in different areas as well as we go through. So we will get better with seeing how the scoring comes out. But then you can look at here and say, okay, what are all the hospitals that it ran? You can see exactly who they are. You can click through and you can find who it pulled for. The sample size was 50, the urban density score, and there's going to be some that are more rural, that are not in the same county, that are going to give you a different look. Another really interesting element to this is you can pull information that would give you insights into what kind of pet owners are here. And so you can look at, okay, in this area, 27% more likely to buy pet supplies online. Makes sense, right? If they're in an area that's higher income, they're probably more tech savvy, all that stuff. So it's looking at average American household and saying within this drive time, within this area, more likely to buy stuff online. Less likely to own, and this is based on the entire population of the area, than the average American household, which is interesting, right? But there still is a lot of people, but it's saying per the amount of total population, it's a little bit less. Less likely to have a cat, more likely to have a dog. And then you can even look at flea and tick, heartworm for cats, heartworm for dogs. The amount of information is obviously just staggering. Like going through this, and I'm showing you a portion of some of it, but you can really get an idea of the audience of what is this area that I could possibly go into, or what is my area today if I feel like I just want to understand it better. And I think that's where you can look at it from both lenses as far as being established or looking to open up a practice yourself. You can and absolutely will get and look at a demographic report. This is definitely the one that's, I would say, the least pretty, most boring. I didn't give the entirety of it because there's just a ton of information as far as kids, marriage, income, all of that, right? And that's what's being aggregated up into this, right? So a lot of it is coming into this already, and you're using that information, but you can look at it broken out. And so it shows you, population changes. And what you can see is the population change from 2010 to 2020 was absolutely massive in this area, right? Huge growth. This is an area that's had massive, massive growth. And I raised my hand because I came down to this area in 2015. So I was part of that massive growth as well. One of my favorite things with the information is then going back to the idea of, Experian in these different groups. I want to try to figure out exactly what group I fall into so that when I do these conversations in the future, I can be like, I'm a B whatever, or I know I'm not a C because C's basically are typically an older audience. But what you have is then this idea of mosaic. So Experian has every individual in the United States broken up into 71 different categories. And so what you can look at is say, what are the categories in my area? Who could I possibly serve? And one of the things that we want to do on an intake form from our side is to say, who do you want to work with? So here are questions. Tell me about your ideal client. Who do you want to work with as a veterinarian? And it will then give us the idea matching those. I want to work with this person and this income, or I want them to have kids and I want them to own a home, or whatever kind of criteria. And it will give us what's the match for the ideal client for you. And what you can do is you can say, this is the area of who makes up living in 15 minutes around this specific location. This is who you want to work with. What's the difference? Do they match? Is it a good fit for what you want to do? Or you might be the person that says, I just want to be able to have a hospital where people will come in and respect when I say, this is what I want to do. They want it. They are there for it. And they want to grow with us. I don't necessarily care that they have, this hobby or they're a value shopper or whatever, right? I just want to make sure I can have a successful business. Isaiah, skip on that. One of the things that we want to try to do is as much information as someone wants to provide, you can get more data back. Or if you just want to say, I want to make sure that I have the odds stacked in my deck to be successful, you can do that as well. But looking at this around the area, you can look at the population count and then understanding who is who. American royalty. Good example of American royalty is they make over $250,000 a year. They're 51 to 65. They have grown kids. This is a really good client typically for a veterinary hospital. I know AO3, kids in Cabernet, this is still kids at home or kids in college, similar thing. They're a little bit different than AO1, but AO3, I know that is one of those core veterinary households. And so you can see that population count here, and then 80% of what makes up. So if you think about the Pareto rule or that 80-20 rule, this is who is in your 15-minute drive time. These are the people that live in your community. boomers and boomerangs, right? We know there's some baby boomers down here. You got all kinds of different folks. We'll come back to that because it's interesting to then look at who is actually, I'll actually just jump ahead, who is actually then coming into the clinic. And I'll show you how we can get that information, but you can look at who actually comes into the specific VCA hospital in Stony Creek with the most amount of visitors. It's A05, C14, and O50, which is a much lower amount of population. So they are attracting these people, yet this is the most amount of population that's there. How we're able to do that is through Mobilytics. And so Mobilytics, I'm going to open this report. It is taking and tracking cell phone data. And this is, again, the part where people are going to say, hey, this feels very big brother, right? But this is using information and saying, what can we do with that information to understand our audience better? And so I am much more of a dark screen versus a light screen person, but I don't think I'm going to do that here because it's going to look funny with the other background. But you can look at from a heat map coming to the location. And so our location is that we're looking at is right here, right across the street from a Costco. And you can zoom out and say, where are people coming to our hospital from? And you can see the heat map gets very red. And so, yes, it's still coming from Noblesville, but you get them from, some from Fortville, from different locations. And these are the visitors that are coming. And these are coming from home locations is what it's telling you. Then you can look at, okay, how many people come, 75% or so come from 10 miles or less from the location that we're at. So we know, hey, if we're going to send out mailers, we're going to send out anything physical, the odds are it's got to be in a 10-mile radius. Anything beyond that, it's not really going to work because we're seeing a high propensity of folks to be there. You get zip codes from where they come from. This is the part that I think is the most interesting. And this is the part where you can actually then look at, and you might be saying, Isaiah, okay, O51, A03, like what do these actually mean? You can understand who these people are. So this is younger and middle-aged singles gravitating to second-tier cities, age of children, income, and there's a lot more information, but this is just like a high view look at the information for this specific category of a consumer that was visiting the hospital. And so they're only 4-ish% of the visitors, and this is over a year time frame, but they are very likely, 15 times more likely to come to this location. So you can look at that in two ways. You could say, is that who I want to attract? Because they're coming, and maybe I should double down on understanding that. Or do I want to just look at what's the number of visitors? Who's coming the most? And that's the B07, right? So B07 across the ages, couples, multi-generational families in suburbia. This is what they're making. They have age of children. This is their current age, their homeowner, all that. And so you can pull out and try to understand who the folks are that are coming to the location. So you can then look at what is our percentage of visitors at the top and understanding the propensity and also just total number of visitors. This gives you the answer to what's our ideal client avatar. So the question that one might have is if these folks, A01, A03, B07, are the most high from a population count, why aren't they coming? It could be the way you're marketing. It could be we're looking at a VCA hospital. Maybe they're going to a private practice, right? Maybe there's something else that is driving them somewhere else. And again, is it going to have all the answers? No, but it's going to have a lot of information for you to be able to kind of look at, review, and understand. And so our big thing is we don't want to be here and tell you how to market to these people, but what you can do is go to whoever is helping you potentially with marketing and build out and ensure that your brand is consistent to attract the people that are coming to you versus maybe shouting to the void and trying to market to a certain segment that's not even coming. And obviously there's more data to pull out. This is like the pretty version of it. You can get, again, kind of those Excel files and some other things that will come with the data. But then you can look under, from a marriage status, children, people in household, all of that information underneath this. And this is all over the last year for that area. And it's going from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. And it excludes, households that are outside of a really far distance from that standpoint. And so this shows you a similar thing, just a screenshot of it from there. But that idea of building out the avatars and understanding who these people are, I think is really important. This is a nice little view of what, C14 and AO5 and an O50 would look like, and tells you a little bit about, just from a population of, America, just the global or the population around the United States, what they make up, what that looks like. But again, you can see very granular into your area as well. And if you pair that then with data, and you could say, okay, who then is this individual? How should I market to them? And this is where I think it gets fun. Again, we're not a marketing company. We want to give you the information to say, if you're running your own social media, if you're doing your own thing, here are some really good tips, ideas, thoughts of how you should have your key messaging, points you should hit on, things you should do. And if you're going to pay someone else, have a conversation, bring this information to them and say, hey, this is who I want to talk to. This is who I want to come into my clinic. And how do we best target these people when we spend our ad money? And so it's trying to be as efficient as possible. And so this one is just a snippet of a longer document. It's an overview of who they are, key messaging, value and quality, family and togetherness, convenient and time saving. So how do you hit these things in your messaging to say, hey, it's really convenient, time saving. We've done this really cool new thing, or we rolled out this new piece of technology, because no one is going to care if you upgraded your PIMS software, right? You're not going to go out to your market and say, hey, we upgraded our PIMS and it's so much better. It makes our lives more efficient. But if you can explain the time savings to them as a client, that's amazing. So like hit on those things, understand who you're talking to. And I don't know a single cohort of people that say, hey, please waste my time. But with that being said, you want to just be thoughtful on how you can turn a lot of this data that might feel just super broad and extremely huge into something that's there. Now, again, at the end, there's kind of like a rollout of a plan. I know no one is launching a primetime TV a campaign. I get that. But what you can do is take a lot of these options. And these are just samples of different things. And a lot of this is stuff that we've tried to pull together, like looking at this information that Experian and others are saying, these are how these people consume content. Are they more mobile? Are they more male? And so it brings out a lot of that stuff. And so, yeah, if someone's on TV more often, you could even look at targeting YouTube, right, in the local area. Like you can look at these things and target it in different ways to say, how can I best spend my marketing money? And that's a way, I think, more for an existing practice. And that's where a lot of this, I think, comes into play of saying, like, you can just take that snippet of this area, this current hospital who's coming in and out of the doors, and saying, who do I have? If you're acquiring a practice, you might want to say, is it the right audience? How can I snippet this location and get a good idea? I think the site score idea is much more for startup. It is much more for a relocation. And you can do it for a current location, but odds are it's like, oh, I got a 10-year lease. There's 8 years left on it. I'm not moving, but I can know that my location is good or bad. But that's just kind of some of the ways that we can use this information as veterinarians, as clinic owners, as maybe an aspirational owner, to get better at understanding what and who we're working with. And so with that, I want to open it up to take a couple different questions. If there are questions, I haven't looked at the chat, or I can just go into the platform and we can look at another area if someone wants to look at an area and overlay things. But yeah, I'm open to feedback from those that are there, or we can spend a little bit more time chatting on some other things.
I could start off with a question I could start off with a question. So as far as use cases go, I was just jotting down some ideas here, and I'm curious to get your thoughts as well with other people on the call. But like, if you wanted to create an audience, could you create an audience of maybe pet owners that live within 15 miles, that have an income above, X number of dollars? I know you're not a marketing company, but could you pull together that audience, and then maybe a postcard could be sent to them with I don't know, like an enticing offer, like 10% off, like a cleaning or some service? Is that something that is that a good use case?
Yeah, so I think what it would be, so it wouldn't be like, hey, it's Isaiah Douglas at X address, like it fits in that profile of that person. But what you can do is you say, hey, in 15 minutes of this area, the exact audience that you want, what's our population, what's the density of it? And so you could create a map that's similar to this one.
Okay.
Right. And you could say, is it worth doing that in this area within 5 miles, 10 miles, whatever? And what does that look like? And then you could pull it from there and say, hey, I can tell what neighborhoods are in this, what addresses are, and you could get the data, right? That is something you absolutely could do. I think from our side, it's not going to be like Joe and Jane, Williams, they're the perfect person, and this is their address. Here's the list. Go take it and send it out. Like, that's not something from our side where we're going to have like names of individuals or like home addresses. But I think it's going to be from I'll call it more like from a macro perspective of, is that person or is this audience worth going after, and are they there? And to say yes, there's some other ideas. I could share some other ideas of how I would personally, if I was trying to get that information, once I verified that that made sense, where
Yeah.
to get it. And a lot of it, I think you could get even just from a public library, candidly, because they have a lot of those databases that you can pull information. You have to be careful with rules and regs and laws on that stuff. So I'll put my disclaimer out there so I don't get sued. But yeah, you could definitely do that.
Gotcha.
And what's nice about that as well is if you had that kind of categorization, it would then feed into what kind of type. And so what you could do is just open a map and then just outlay where those people are and say, where do I want to, go or spend time? The other interesting thing that you can do with Mobilytics is you can look at, and this again, I know some people are gonna be like, wow, that's ridiculous information that you can pull, is you can look at visitor behaviors before or after, where they go. Are they frequenting, this grocery store? Are they going to this spot? And maybe you put signage, you put advertisement, you put that information in these places. So I can tell like, hey, they're going to this shopping center, and you can put it on the map and say, this is kind of the most frequented place that they're going post. And I know up here, yeah, there's a Meijer right there. There's a Walmart, there's other shopping. So it makes sense. Hey, maybe they're going to the veterinarian, and then either before or after they're doing something else. So you can, and I was just thinking about this the other day, there's a dentist that advertises on, I don't know if everyone's in an area where Kroger's are popular, but there's Kroger, which is a grocery store, and right on the seat where you put your kid, right, it's got their little advertisement. Problem is I can't remember his name, but I know he's there. But you can do stuff like that if you knew, like in that area, that's where a lot of people that are going and visiting you are going right after or before. So that's another way that you can use the data to try to spend marketing money, because again, at the end of the day, there's only so much that you can spend, and only so much that you can spend and actually see some sort of result. But it's like, how do you again put as many of the odds of success or likelihood of success of that leading to someone that's going to come see you? And I think that's one way to look at it too. So it just sparked another thought.
Okay, so I would imagine that most of us are not working with advertising companies, right? We've got like the girl in house who's doing our Facebook posts and the whatever that's sending out our reminders, and that's what we're doing so far. So how would we use this I know I'm kind of asking the same question that you just went over, but like, are there some usable bite-sized pieces that wouldn't feel so overwhelming, you think, that would be more important to look at than others?
Yeah. So I think one of the things, so it would depend on the report that someone was using and what their use case was. But if they wanted to just do it in a bite-sized piece, and
I just need to get more, like, let's just say I need to get more bodies in my door. I don't care who they are.
yeah. So what you can do, and so this Mobilytics, which is this little piece here. So this is the report that's there, right? So you could run this on your specific hospital, and then you could take it, and like when you think about the way that you would follow up or have conversations and say, okay, we're not spending X amount of dollars with marketing company A, B, or C. We want to do it ourselves. Okay, what can we do for that? You can look at ways to tailor community outreach. So maybe you want to do a partnership with, hey, this specific audience also goes to this other cool, smaller local business that would be a good fit. Maybe we do a joint thing, coffee, brewery, whatever. You could do that. So it could give you some community outreach ideas. You could try to figure out also ways that the core audience likes to be communicated with and how you follow up with them. If you're following up today with some sort of messaging that you're like, I don't know if it's working, or an offer like we talked about before, like a 10%, you could create an offer that you think is compelling, but to the ideal audience, they are not the person that wants the discount. And that might seem weird, but like to them, it devalues your service, that you're trying to attract XYZ person. And by giving them a discount, they're like, oh, so they just overcharge. Like that's the way that their mind works. Mm-hmm. So I think you can try to verify the things that you're doing to attract those people. For another audience, depending on who you're trying to attract, that offer is going to be super compelling and can help. But I think one of the key things that we want to do in understanding is, yeah, not everyone has the marketing budget to do everything. And so taking some of the bits of information and understanding how to interpret these reports, and then going back to the team and saying, this is who we are focused on going to, this is who we are focused on talking to. And that is kind of this idea of this piece of a really good overview, key messaging, and bringing that back and ensuring that whatever we're doing, when we're doing these posts, I want you to hit on these 4 things, Isaiah. When you put out posts, think of these 4 things. How do you integrate one of these things to the audience? That's the way that I would look at it. I do think that there's merit in marketing. Again, I have no horse in that race, right? I'm not trying to tell everyone to go spend a bunch of money on marketing, but I do think when you evaluate like how are most people making buying decisions, knowing who is coming to you, and if it's a baby boomer, it's going to be a different way that you're going to spend that marketing money than if it's someone that's more of a millennial like myself, that's a little bit more tech savvy, that's probably going to go and look at reviews or Yelp or other places. Like the way that you communicate or interact with them is going to be very different. So I think it's more of an optimization, but if you're doing it yourself, it can just be tweaks on the way you do Facebook posts, the photos or the things that you do, the offers that you create. I think that probably is the way that I would try to lean into it from an existing established location, because we have heard that feedback from a handful of people we've talked to. I don't have that person that I can just hand it off to and say, hey, here's some money and go make it better.
Interpret this for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about, is there a way to get this information for your current practice, or is it just so broad that we're looking at?
No. So here, you can absolutely get it for a specific practice. And the part is, it doesn't have to be, this got brought up the other day, and because someone asked me, like, basically, if I want to look at what my competitor in a certain market is doing, can I understand their audience? And the answer is yes. Now, morally, all these other things, is that what you want to do? You make those decisions. That's not for us to decide, but you can do this on any sort of location that you want to. And yes, the idea is that you would want to do it on your own practice. And so I think that there's a delineation of some of the information that we're trying to provide, which is for someone looking at doing a startup or figuring out where's the best place to go. That's kind of one service of what we can do. And then if I have an existing location and I have an existing, clinic, that's kind of a different offering. And so you can look at what we would consider like a market analysis. Makes a lot more sense for someone that's already in existence. Mm-hmm. The site selection, much more important for the person that's going to go spend high 6 figures, low 7 figures to open up a hospital. For them, it's like, hey, that makes a ton of sense to make sure you pick the right location correctly. But no, you can go anywhere in the United States. I can't do Canada. I had a request of looking at someone in Canada. I don't have that information. So that's the only tricky part. But yeah, anywhere in the United States, and you can get that information from a mobile lytics perspective, as long as your clinic is not, it basically does a geofence around a location. So I ran into one situation recently where the hospital was under one of those new builds where it's all the apartments and stuff above, and the clinic's on the corner. Awesome. Really hard to get that information because you're going to pull all that data from anyone that visits those apartments up above. Now, what you could do is you could say, hey, maybe I want to attract these people here, and you do that, or you could pull another location similar, but it's really just dragging information around and making a fence, and then you just pull all the information out of that contained fence. So for a de novo startup, maybe ground up construction, pull the Starbucks around the street, a grocery store, something that's close that they would want to mimic an audience of, and you can see who those people are there, and that's easy to do. But you can do it at any location. There are variables and there can be things that can make it trickier, but you can always do the market analysis of just, population, who makes up that area, are there good clients in that area, like those kind of things. That's easier based on just kind of the broader categories of kind of Experian. If I can say, are there good veterinary clients in this area, and then what is kind of the competition and what does that look like? You can narrow that down pretty quickly to understand what the opportunity is. Mm-hmm. I think for satellite clinics, it can be interesting as well. I've had some of those conversations where people are like, I have this idea, I want to go into XYZ spot and do something slightly different that can maybe feed our main location. And I think you could use this information for that as well.
I can keep going. Does anyone else have questions? Because I can. I will. Okay. We have a client who feels like they are in a small town with no options for moving. Can you pair this with available real estate?
So the pairing with available real estate, that part of it, I think in like a V2 or maybe in the future. Today, basically our response is we have a relationship with basically a healthcare realty network of independent, basically brokers around the country, that if you're in a certain market or geographic area, we can make an introduction for boots on the ground. Because one of the key things is I can tell you the perfect location, in my opinion, right? Where, based on the data, where the perfect location is. Is there any commercial real estate that actually fits? That's the tricky part. And so what you can do, and the way that we look at this is, it's not replacing that person and saying, hey, don't ever talk to Isaiah in Milwaukee to find the spot. It's saying, if you work with Isaiah in Milwaukee and find 3 locations, you can pick the right location, or you can say, I want to be in this area. And then instead of driving around town and taking up a bunch of hours and time, you can make that search a lot more narrow and a lot quicker to get you open sooner. And so I think that's the way that we would look at it. If you're rural, you could just say, is there enough business in this area based on the information to justify being here? Should I continue down this road? Do I keep banging my head against the wall? Or is it, you're the best doctor in the world, it's just not a market that can sustain you in the way that you want to run your business? Or maybe you figure out you need to make tweaks. So yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways to use the information. And part of it is, when we set out to start this, it was the site selection idea, and it's kind of morphed as we've had conversations of what can this data do? What do people want the data for? And it is extremely powerful, but it also needs to have some way to interpret it. So that's not just a bunch of pretty pictures and a bunch of data on this side. Like, how do I then take that and say, this is the implementation step from there? And I think that's the part that we're trying to continue to make sure, regardless of what your situation is, you can take it and say, I can make 1 to X amount of changes that can improve it.
Pretty impressive. Anyone?
How do we just reach out to you if we want this done for our clinic?
Yeah, you can reach out to me, and the information was on the last slide. I was, again, hopeful that I would have a really pretty beautiful website that is almost done, ready for everyone to go check out, but I don't yet, which is the beauty of just talking about everything before it's officially launched. But yes, so you can reach out and you can say, this is what I want. This is the data that I want. Which of the reports are there? Or it could be one of those things where we will always, into the future, say, this is what I think it should be. But if this report needs to change, if I'm providing information that everyone says, hey, they have a question, or this isn't answering the question, the report needs to change. And I think that's, for us, we feel like we've had enough conversations with your peers to narrow down what they want. When I provide a really good report to someone that I know is a veterinarian that started multiple hospitals, has an MBA, and he says, that's way too much, you need to narrow it down. I was like, okay, I need to make this simpler and more approachable. And so like that feedback is vitally important. But yeah, if you just want to reach out to hello@pinpointmypractice.com and just say, this is what I'm looking at, we can have a conversation, we can get some information around for you, and make sure that you get what you are looking for from that standpoint. It's a good question, though.
Michael, you went off mute. Anything? Oh, okay. Oh, you are on mute. Can't hear you.
Is that better?
Yes.
There we go. I was just going to say hi to Isaiah. I had to step away to take care of something. So you may have talked about this, but for a practice like ours that's already existing, well, we ain't moving. So what, if I, would you run this type of data to see where to spend my marketing? Like if I'm running other marketing, where I'm going to kind of target it zip code wise? Is that what?
Yeah. So good to see you, Michael, first and foremost. You're on my list of someone I needed to ping. So this is great. I'm glad you're here. But knowing that you have someone that helps with some of this, that individual's seen a lot of this information. We've had some good conversations. You can tailor a ton of what you do online with the information. But I think this idea of like the mobilytics of taking your location, geofencing around it, pulling the data, and what you can do, and we've done this for someone else, is if they've moved. So I have another connection friend up in the Wisconsin area that they've moved, but they've only been there like 6 months in their new location, but they had their old location for a long time. And so what we were able to do is look at their old location and look at their new location and pair those together from when they were actually there. But yeah, what I would tell you is you would probably want to take and look at kind of like a marketing insights, what we call like our mobilytics marketing insight report, which is take the geofence, get this information, and then pull out some of the different pieces and figure out the top handful of audiences that are coming to us. And you can then look at the same idea of who is the biggest cohort of folks in the area that are core veterinary clients, and who am I seeing, and why aren't we getting these people? The answer could be two things. A, you don't want them, or B, they aren't resonating with something that you're doing from a marketing perspective, or you might be attracting all of them. I have my own thoughts of why VCA might not be seeing these people that are AO3 and AO1, which are like the ideal kind of veterinary clinic clients. My thought is they might want something that is more of a private practice approach. That's maybe me being a little biased, but I think that might be why you don't see them coming to their clinic as much. So yeah, I would say the Mobalytics piece would be what you would want, and you would pull from that.
Thanks, man. It looks really cool. I wish this had existed, 8 years ago. Yeah, it would have been neat. But yeah, I'm gonna go back and watch the recording, so see what I missed, and then I'll probably give you a shout.
Yeah, please do. And yeah, it's one of those things where, again, I always look at what are other industries doing, and what is the information that would be most valuable for where someone's at. And again, the genesis of it was, if I'm going to build a new hospital, or I'm going to go to a startup and I'm going to spend a ton of money, and I see Darren out here, like if I'm going to go to, a lender, and I'm going to go, spend 6 or 7 figures, I want to make sure that I'm in the right spot. And that was the idea at the beginning. And now it's like, okay, where do we go source and find all this data? And how can we take all this data and then narrow it down into something that's approachable and bite-sized, that then can give you actionable insights? And so, yeah, it just started with, if I was going to start up a veterinary hospital, how would I do it? And what information do I want? And it's more from there into, hey, I think there's some really good information for existing hospitals as well. So, yep.
And not creepy at all, right? That they have all of this information on us.
Well, and I can give another presentation some other time about thoughts on that stuff on mobile privacy and other things, but not for today. We only got a little bit of time left, so
right now we'll
I'm
just
probably
use
not even the right person to do it.
Well, if no one else has any questions, I will just thank you, Isaiah, so much. This was a lot. It was good. It was good. It was a lot. I'm glad that we have you to explain it, right? And be our resource for getting it all through. Yeah, I feel overwhelmed, and I don't have a practice to market or buy, but I would want to know this information if I did. So we will send you out a thing for that. And as always, we are a small business, and we survive on reviews just like you do. So if you were so inclined, we would love a review. Please, 5 stars, always our goal. And then Matt put the email in the chat for the CE certificate. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you again, Isaiah. Appreciate everyone, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.